So hello. Hi, everyone. So my name is Sarah Tam. I am an instructor here over at VFS. And we are here today to learn everything from everyone from Jesyca right here, our amazing guest. Definitely we'll get into a little bit more of an introduction of Jesyca in just a second. I do have a few housekeeping things that I want to go through. First of all, thank you everyone for joining. Lovely to see everyone. It's so great. I'm not sure where everyone is coming from. If you are from VFS, if you're not, but please say hello to somebody. Welcome, welcome. So yes, we have the chat here. Please use it as you can. It's a good way to interact with everyone, but we also have the Q&A chat as well. If you can use that to please put your questions in there. We're probably going to have a chat with Jesyca for about 30 minutes or so, and then we can jump into some of your questions depending on how things are going, maybe sooner, maybe a little bit longer, but definitely want to see, how the flow goes. Definitely let us know in that chat, and then we can get started. Jesyca, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Awesome. So let's just kick things off with figuring out, who are you? Who is Jesyca? What is your career path?
This is when I would start flashing all my filters and be like, who really am I? Hi, everybody. My name is Jesyca Durchin Schnepp. Usually I just go by my credited name, Jesyca Durchin. But I do have family here tonight are listening in. So I'm calling out to the Schnepps out there. And I am a producer. When I think about everything that I have done and all the things that I've been working on in my career, it really boils down to being a producer. And what essentially that means at the end of the day, when I look at everything that I've done, it's always been from the creation from nothing to something. There is a magic in that. There is something that I had a great boss who once told me that once you go through that process and you create something, and especially if it's a hit, you will go and spend the rest of your career looking for that high again. So when I talk about myself and I think about all the things that I've done, and people are like, well, you've been an executive and you've been these things, it really, at the end of the day, I see myself as a producer of content.
I love it. Thank you so much. Producer for content. That is such an interesting, I would love to know a little bit more. Maybe I'm not quite sure if everyone even knows what a producer is. Maybe you can give a little bit of that.
Good. Well, let's start with there. I always, there's two ways I describe what a producer does. I'll go with my favorite way. My favorite way is a great party planner. Throwing a great party is it's also like producing. You are really creating an experience for people who have all kinds of different interests, priorities, goals, and also skills and things that they bring to the party. And as a producer, your job is to take it from that beginning idea of what it's going to be, and then putting all of the pieces together to make this event happen. Why I used to use the idea that it was more like a contractor and that you were eventually building something is that as we've grown in sort of this new digital landscape, things have changed so much. Experiences, the outputs are so different now that I'm now really focused as a producer myself in my career to make it about really the experience of the creation and what that means and the impact it has on the output, on the final product.
That's fantastic. I really appreciate that explanation. And if anyone else has any other questions about that, please feel free to drop it in the chat, in the Q&A chat. But let's move over to kind of the focus of today's conversation, which is really empowering your audience through inclusive design and recreating, real world play. Let's jump into that a little bit more. Yeah, go ahead.
So today we were talking about this just before we started. Again, kind of like looking through sort of what my career trajectory has been and sort of how we're looking at immersive content. And I use immersive and emerging too much, but it's really this power of sort of these new platforms that are coming out that we are understanding more and more how we can get into an inclusive and immersive world through this idea of play. I kind of go through this, instead of being really specific about whether it's for film or for games or for TV or for theme parks, I try to look at content creation from the heart of it and the engagement of it. And I'm not a gamer. So, and I'm not an expert in all of these different platforms. My expertise and my experience has really been about play. And why I like play so much and why it's given me this filter that I really encourage everyone to look at content through is because play has so many things going for it. It's platform agnostic. It's based on something that it's global to everyone. It's incredibly important to our mental health and it can alleviate suffering. And it can also exist in places that you don't normally think it can exist if you start being really creative about it. So I kind of use the word play very loose with engagement, but it's where it actually kind of becomes the experience is when you can sort of let go of everything else that's going on around you and become immersed in that world. So that's where play is really important to me. And that is where kind of the gateway to all the things that I have done, where it leads.
That's awesome. I love the idea of play and that you don't necessarily have to be a gamer in order to like really incorporate these ideas into almost everything you do.
Well, because I feel like there's a lot of, and I'm hoping that we'll have some questions about this, but that as you're going to film school, so I actually did my senior thesis on film schools, and this was a long time ago, but I was thinking about how specifically siloed so much education is, so many classes are, so many even work opportunities are. And yet what we're seeing in the actual working fields in entertainment is a need for Renaissance people who can do multiple things, who bring multiple attributes to a project. And that we get to celebrate those things, which is just as important as the education or even just their original interest in the field. So what I'm seeing is I'm seeing this need for like more openness, more cross-pollination between different types of disciplines. And I still feel like education and sort of work trajectory and how human resources work has not really caught up yet. So it's up to the individual to take advantage of all the resources that are out there to educate oneself and get yourself to the level where you need to be.
That's amazing. I really love that. And I was just wondering, and it's okay if you don't have any experiences that maybe you can kind of provide for us to kind of like see how we could do that in our workplaces and how we can really foster that play.
Foster play. Well, my favorite play experience is always going to go back to Barbie. So I was the producer of the first Barbie movies. So the first 7 animated films, which actually started in production in 2000. I got to be part of an incredible, small, tiny, independent team as an independent producer making these 3D animated films, working with partners like New York City Ballet and the London Symphony Orchestra. And these movies meant everything to me. I did Barbie and the Nutcracker all the way to Barbie Island Princess. But one of the things that was really important was that I played out all of the movies with my play experience. I played with Barbie until I was 16 years old. I grew up in a house of only women. I went to convent school for 12 years. My world was highly feminized. And so I had a natural love for fashion and fashion dolls. And so that ability got me past any sort of concerns that I might have. Like, I don't know how to make an animated 3D movie on my own. But I was able to use the energy and the knowledge base of other things, which was play. And which was a great thing because my ability to play with Barbies and play with little girls playing with Barbies also helped us to develop a line of toys every year that those movies went out. So the movies and the toys were very interconnected in how they were thought, how we analyzed what the play would be. And people are like, they were just, the movies were just big commercials for the toys. And what people don't understand is we cared about every level of the play experience, from the wish fulfilled in the promise of what Barbie and the Nutcracker could be, all the way through every licensed merchandise product. They all had to work together.
Oh my God, I love that you use Barbie as an example because
You
I also
never
grew up with
know. Sarah, this
it.
is what I tell people all the time because it used to crack my mom up, especially she'd call and I'd be like making a Barbie dress with Barbie fashion designer, which was my first big game. And she's like, how did that happen? That you have glitter at your desk and you're doing, and I look, I know I'm just the luckiest girl in the world. That's all there is to it. So yes, Barbie was very, very important to me, and she was part of that play experience. And then people are like, oh, I don't have anything like that. But that's often not true. You know, people bring their expert. We have somebody on the project I'm working now who's an expert leather maker. They're bringing that expertise to the world of 3D. You know, we bring so much as people to what we do.
I 100% agree with that. You never know where some of your experiences will take you.
Yeah.
Never. It's amazing.
Never.
Let's move a little bit more towards the inclusive design and understanding what that is. I love talking about inclusivity. I know that this is a huge passion of yours as well. I would love to get maybe just a little high level of the things that you've been involved with or what you're passionate about.
So inclusive design means a lot of things to a lot of people. And it's also like one of those really trendy words. Like I even love typing it. I'm like, I'm so cool. It's like inclusive design, but I'm passionate about it because there is a through line in the idea of play and toys that anyone should be able to pick something up that is a well-designed toy and play with it. There shouldn't be a design limitation based on whether what your economic status is. There shouldn't be a block in your enjoyment of it because you didn't go to a certain school or know a certain person. Play is toys are the ultimate in some ways. There's obvious issue gender toys, but there's a great democracy to the idea of play for everyone. So that's what I was saying is that my inclusive design comes from that filter. And what I noticed, because I've had the opportunity to work on so many different types of products, namely games and then going to linear entertainment and then back into interactive entertainment, is that I've been able to see the crossover potential in the joyful experience of getting to know a brand, of getting to go visit a place. We are seeing more and more of these things as the internet becomes more powerful, as streaming becomes adopted into our society, where you can actually benefit from all of these pieces coming together. I may have lost the thread of your question.
That's totally okay. I know that when you're really passionate about something, you talk about one thing and then it moves over to another.
And I think I try to stay as open and inclusive in the inclusive idea because it has been so siloed, especially in gaming, especially in cross-platform. The frustration that I have felt in multiple companies where I can't hire somebody who's been in games into a feature film because they haven't done it before. And all of these things are really changing. So when we think about design, we need to be thinking about all of the people who are playing, not just the person that we think of as a gamer or as our one demographic audience. And I think dovetailing with that, and this is an opportunity I get to have right now, is when you work for a bigger company, you have the ability to test more. So it's not just your gut feeling on, this is what I think this group of people are going to like. You actually get the opportunity to go out and test. But even if you don't have the resources for testing like that, you can still use your own research abilities. There's a lot of information out there. So I encourage people to always be looking out for what the audience wants and what they care about. And that's what makes design really inclusive.
That is fantastic. I really like inviting, not just the people who are creating the games, but also the audience, the people who are playing, like everyone. I really kind of want to follow that vein about, having that space at work, being able to foster this. How do you have any advice or suggestions on how people can empower those that we work with to be able to drive these kind of changes or be able to stand up and talk about these things? Because you might not have that opportunity to be in that, space that feels safe.
That is absolutely true. It's so good to know that right now, companies aren't just looking at this and saying it as an ethical decision to appeal to more and more people in different groups. They're understanding that these people actually have the power of the purse, that audiences, underrepresented groups, they're coming out and saying, we want content that reflects our values, our beliefs, and we will pay for that content. But you need to actually not just be kowtowing to it. You need to actually be inclusive in a real way. And I think that companies are listening. They have to be now. So I think there's more opportunities. And if you don't feel safe, you can switch it around to make it be about profit. It doesn't have to all just be about you. I have lots and lots of data. There's lots of data out there that's pointing to you cannot afford to just be looking at one block of a demographic. You can't.
Yeah, no, I definitely also agree with that. You definitely cannot do that. I was just wondering, because I think we have seen a shift in the industry for, whether film or games, on how things have been about inclusivity and making sure that we've had that in design. What does that mean for, for people? And I know in the Vancouver scene, for example, in the past decade, we've seen a big shift as well. I wonder if you'd be able to maybe walk through a little bit of your experiences in the West Coast and how that's kind of been for someone, especially someone, a woman in the industry, how it was maybe a decade or so ago to now, if you have any experiences you want to share.
So you mean the change in reception as being a woman in the industry?
You can definitely, in that perspective, I think that'd be fantastic. Yeah.
So I was early in this entertainment software industry. I started in the industry in 1993. I had come out of film school and worked for Tim Burton, for the director. He had done just at the end of Batman 2, and then I came in on Nightmare Before Christmas and got really involved in the technology. And right in my early to mid 20s, I was at a crossroads trying to figure out, was I going to go into film? It's really, really hard, and no one's going to let a 23-year-old produce a movie. Or was I going to, a friend of mine talked about CD-ROM. And all I really wanted in my head was I just have to be producing. So I kind of jumped into this really early kids CD-ROM business that was just kind of growing in LA. And I have to tell you, it was great. I have been to every single E3 that ever was. Unfortunately, may have been the last one. It was a fantastic opening to this incredible business. And because I was working on Barbie and I was working at Mattel, it didn't occur to me that there were no women in the business because there were lots of women at Mattel. And there was a lot of feedback from women working at Barbie on the Barbie software side. So in the late 90s, I was the producer and then executive producer of all the Barbie software for girls, including Barbie Fashion Designer, and just a whole series of these software titles. And I just thought, okay, our next step is that this will inspire girls everywhere. Barbie Fashion Designer was a huge hit. We'll get more girls into games. And then I kind of went off and did Disney and did a couple other things, did some films, did my own company, and then recently coming back to software, where I think out of 100 applicants, I might have one female or non-binary person. It's disheartening as a person who's been in this industry for so long and thinking that we had made it so much better, and had created this whole interest and that people would just naturally gravitate towards the business, to realize that that didn't happen at all. I mean, one of the things that happened was that I think a lot of women who were working in the kids space, they could no longer work in the space when all that content became free on mobile. So that whole generation of women who would have naturally gone on to be bigger producers or interactive producers or run companies, they end up doing things like I did, went to animation, did other stuff. So I feel like there was this huge gap in time in the technology and entertainment space that just didn't get filled. And I think that is changing and evolving. I think Vancouver is a little special because Vancouver has had such a high tech concentration for a long time. That's where I did all the Barbie movies, was through Rainmaker and Mainframe. And so I really feel like it's about Vancouver has had a special connection with entertainment software. There's always been more women in the Vancouver studios that I've worked with. And actually, to be quite frank, in the Canadian developers in general, I'm not sure what that's about, but it has been slowly changing here, but it's not as prevalent as certainly I would have hoped in 2023. Again, I hope I answered it.
Yes, yeah, I think
Things are changing for the better slowly here. Better for you guys. That's the quick wrap up.
Absolutely. No, and I definitely agree. I saw that a little bit as well with my own career path. It wasn't like very typical, but definitely started in the tech sector. And yeah, exactly, you know, the things I saw the same thing as you. So I'm very happy that we had very similar, but we're seeing an upward trend. So that's great. Awesome. A reminder for everyone, if you have any questions, please pop them up in the question Q&A. That's what I want to say, Q&A chat box. But happy to continue talking to Jesyca about a little bit more experiences. I do want to note that maybe we have some people here who are just graduating or just starting school. Do you have any advice for anybody here, you know, who might be starting in the industry soon, about all the things that you're talking about, including inclusivity, play, being able to incorporate that, but being super new in the industry and maybe kind of scared and not sure like how to navigate certain things?
I have to tell you, you have never been in a time that you have as much content and opportunity in front of you. It is amazing what's coming down the line as far as, you know, even like theme parks, and companies are going to try to get people out of their homes and into retail spaces. There are going to be opportunities we don't even know about in VR and AR and how that's working. All of the things that you want to do, the stories that you want to tell, I think right now, you're just going to be seeing it come alive. I know people are very concerned about AI, and I think it's going to be a tool that's going to take off the stuff that we don't want to have to do and allow us to really focus on the fun stuff. So I feel like people who are graduating right now should be really optimistic and excited about what's in front of them. I also think that people who are graduating right now should be making their own content and should be doing it on a daily basis and should be talking about it and should be creating and creating and creating and creating, because there's nothing to stop you. Be weird, be wonderful, and go out and just, what you're looking for is your voice. Because as an employer at a studio, and I've talked to lots of other producers at my level, we are looking for, again, that whole person who brings a unique, interesting perspective into this world. We know that we probably can't get you guys back in the office, even though, you know, Warner Brothers has a beautiful office. Everything's very lovely, very luxurious. But we can get you to come in if you are experiencing work that actually incorporates the things that give you joy and that you're great at. So I would say for people who are graduating right now, it's not the school, the focus, it's the focus of you, what you're telling, what you're talking about, the stories that you're telling, and the excitement that you're bringing, because companies need you.
I love that. That's really great advice. And you're right. Companies
100%,
do.
I swear to God.
I swear. I'm not making
I swear. So much great stuff is happening.
I love it. And then in the same kind of vein, we have a question here from Pedro about advice you'd give to a foreigner who wants to try out for the film industry in Canada.
In Canada. Well, I think that you trying out for the film industry. So if you're being an actor, I think that can be difficult. I'm not really familiar with the type of entertainment law for Canada. I think that if you're interested in being a producer and being a content creator, you don't have to be in a project to be working in film. That's the cool thing now with TikTok and all the other products out there, the platforms like YouTube. You can be working and creating for yourself and joining other groups and creating with them. So I always recommend to people who are I just had this conversation with somebody from Brazil a couple of days ago, create content, you're a content creator, create content, create it in English if you can, and in your native language. Everything now is going to be about search and content that's out there for the algorithms, right? So you want to be out there in as many ways possible. Content is totally king and queen. Should be
And
queen.
queen. Should be queen. No, I agree. And I think content, yeah, there you go. And I absolutely agree. You know, there's so many now different ways that we can, you know, present content in different channels and different media. And so that I love that answer, and I love that content is queen. That is exactly right. Sorry.
And I was going to say, you know, people also they're too hard on themselves. Like you're like, oh, if I'm going to make content, it's going to be the perfect 2 minutes. It's the perfect 30 seconds. It's the no. That's not the world that we live in anymore. People want to see your progress. I can't get used to it, but now I'm totally addicted to progression videos. So you can see how the person made it, what the final outcome. There is a world where you can get a group of people to be in it with you, so you're not so alone. And that's the stuff that you have the opportunity to test out.
Yes, agree 100% with that. That is amazing. We will go into some questions now, just because I see a few trickling in, which is great. We have one here from Berenger. What's the difference between directors and producers, and when do they blur?
There's so many good snarky comments I can make right here. But traditionally, a director really is about the vision and holds the vision of the project. So in games and in films and TV, it can mean some different things. There's also this ubiquitous weird showrunner title that you might hear of, where the kind of the worlds can a little bit collide, where somebody can be a director, writer, producer. So there's different things, but classically a director is the keeper of the vision, and the producer is the creator, the generator of the resources to make the vision happen. That's kind of the easiest way to define.
Sounds so easy, right?
I know. And then people will be like, oh, the producer's always the money, but that's not always the case.
Not always. Yeah,
Not always.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think they show that like in movies, like the producer's the one with the money, but yeah, absolutely not.
My friends would be like, no, that's the executive producer. Executive producer the money, producer's the person who does the work, the associate producer is the person that the producer makes, you know. But here's the interesting thing. It depends on also the size and scope of the project. So something like the project that I'm on now will have 6 producers, because it goes over 4 years. You know, like there's lots of different types of productions.
That's absolutely really good to note too. That it's not just a producer and everyone does the same job. It's very different for everybody else. And
what I love is now we're starting to get these group directors. So you're seeing like 3 people who directed Spider-Man. It's so good, so good. The latest one. And I was thinking how wonderful it must be to not be the only person maintaining the vision, that you can have a team vision holders. And I could see that happening a lot more in the future.
Looking forward to that. I hope so. I have a question here from Melissa, and I think this is a great question. So it says, how should one approach presenting an unconventional industry knowledge? For example, you use that, the Barbie example and how you got to work on the movie. But how can someone really portray that, like in their CV or their application, that they have all these interesting different kind of activities or interests or hobbies? Is it usually at what stage? Was it into interview? Is there any way that you can maybe help the team out?
I use something called workfolio.com. I created a website so I could own my own name, and I put a bunch of my video is so much stronger than documents, images. You do video, images, in some words. My workfolio, if you just go to jessicadurchin.com, it's okay, but it's an example of how what I tell people is to put all of their interests together in one specific place. And it's not just a CV, it's like showing that what you bring to this world is special.
I don't think I've ever actually heard of that. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's great. And I don't know how much it is a month, but it's a great way to also own your SEO. So you own your name, so you're more likely to be in search engines at the top of the list with your information as opposed to what somebody else has written about you. or if you have a name that other people have.
Oh, that's important, especially when you have a very common name.
Common names, it's tough. I'm lucky. My mom is not a good speller. Well, she spelled out my name, and that's how I got the Y.
Oh, it's a fun fact. Let's see, we have another question here. Do you have any advice on the process of raising money from investors? What do investors look for when choosing to support a project?
Yes. Investors are tough, but they're out there. And the most important thing about an investor is the story, your story to tell them. So I spent a great many years trying to find investment for my software company called Digital Play Space. I had a product called Digital Dollhouse that I launched in 2009, and I found an angel investor in 2007. But I had been looking for 6 years. So it's not an easy world to navigate. However, there are some great lists out there and great opportunities for very specific groups. So let's say you come from a certain place. You might find investors that come from the same hometown that you do. It's finding a way to have your story connect with that investor story or with their goals. So going into investors and being just like, my product is the greatest product ever, is not enough. It's never enough. You can't even be like, I'm the most qualified person ever. It's got to align with what their goals are over a certain period of time. And of course, you always have to have a route to profit that is as quick as possible. So I always tell people, it's like, if you're pitching something, you're like, I don't know how to make money on it, blah, blah. Then you have a really specific and different group of investors. Those are art investors. Those are people who can throw money around, or they're people who just want to sponsor new artists. And those exist too. So I just say, find the right investor and find out what their story is, and then do the down and dirty work to find out how you guys can connect.
That's really great advice. I love that. When it comes to licensing, now I'm not sure if you had to do a little bit with the Barbie, but is there any advice that you can give about that? If you've ever had, positive or not as positive dealings with licensing?
Licensing is really rough. I've dealt with some great, talented artists. One in particular I love is stuff, and he has wonderful consumer products, and I've pitched for him, and I've gone out and done a lot of work, and he has been ripped off continuously. I mean, he's been covered legally, he's spent lots of money, but the licensing world, especially in this world of digital everything, it's a very hard way until you've reached a certain level to make money. I do always point out, and this might be a little bit of a dated story, but if you're interested in how a license can work out of sort of a passion project, I like to point to Lucas the Spider, which is a YouTube product that was created by a Pixar animator because his nephew Lucas was scared of spiders. And it's the cutest spider you've ever seen in your whole life, I swear. And I hate spiders. And you love Lucas, yes, I was like, Lucas, right? But what's interesting is there's a couple of articles about how it became a product and how they experimented around YouTube in creating the consumer product. So this high idea of franchise development through licensing, it's very possible. It's very difficult.
I agree, very difficult.
Can be.
And I see a few Lucas, awesome.
Right, cutest spider ever. I heard a story that when they started advertising around the YouTube window where the animation was, they actually created a little consumer doll for Lucas. It was like they did a run of about 6,000 dolls, thinking, we'll get these little animals out in like a week. And I think they ran out of them in like an hour. They weren't aware that just that type of exposure. So if I was, to build up that type of license, you're building up your audience. You're speaking continuously to your audience until that audience breaks through.
Thank you. I have a couple of producer questions. Or at least in the frame of production. What advice can you give as a producer to writers breaking into the video game industry?
It's a big world. go for mobile to start. I had no idea. I just got some of the new numbers. It was like 64% of all games sold are mobile. Have samples of your work across different platforms. Use video. Don't make people just say, hey, I have a script I want you to read, and this is the character development. You have to make things so that people can see what you can do. Don't wait for somebody to say, here, I've got this idea, you make it.
I love that. Here's an idea, you make it.
Yeah, it happens. I can't even tell you, I've had people who've done pitches and I said, oh, well, send me the script. And they'll say, well, you know what, let me tell you the story. Let me start on page 1. And I think, I can't do this.
All right, that's great advice. Thank you. What's challenging to being a producer? And you can specifically in Canada or in your previous experiences elsewhere.
What is challenging? What isn't challenging about being a producer? Because you are the holder of sort of the energy, I think, of the project, you are kind of keeper of the faith in many ways. Like the director would often be the vision, or the creative team will be the vision. And as the producer, I'm sort of monitoring the emotional welfare and the mental health of the team. That can be very draining on a person. I think when I was younger, I took on way too much emotional responsibility for everyone. And I joke about this now, but I also used to think that worrying about something was the same thing as working on something. And those two things are very different concepts. So now I've learned about the idea that I can work on things and offer information, but I'm not responsible for all the hand holding that I think I thought producing was. And I think that's kind of supported in the media and also in the impression of what women are good at. You see this a lot where it'll be like all male directors and all female producers. I try not to be a mom in that sense, though I am a mom, because I don't think that's healthy now for my teams.
I don't think that is healthy as well. You shouldn't have to be a mother to people at work.
No, it's not. But I think there's a time. I think there's a time where you think you have to, and that's your value to it. Because you're taught that if you're not, lighting, or you're not doing these really specific jobs, and you're just the producer, what's your value? Your value is to be there and be a conduit of communication and a conduit of information for people. I always say that my job is also being I am the curator, the caretaker of the investment that the studio is making into the product. So I care about the people, but I also care about the resources being given to me.
I think you absolutely hit that right on the head. Production really is that conduit, whether it's the communication, whether it's being almost like a translator for other teams to really understand, where things are supposed to go. Usually, with teams, if they have a question, the first person they go to is probably their producer or a producer. So usually you have to kind of know all the information, which is great.
And for me, I believe that a producer is a support person. If I was to say who my personal producing hero is, it would be Lorne Michaels, because he produced SNL, and his words were, a good producer leaves no fingerprints. I try to not make the projects about me, try to make them about the project.
I love that. I'm going to have to steal that from you. And then steal that from Lorne. Yeah.
It's his quote.
I have another question here. How can you level interest in playfulness or storytelling to get a job in film or tech when you don't necessarily have the experience?
Well, I think it's about showing how you manifest playfulness into story. So, for example, when you were talking, that when I was listening to that question, I was thinking about, the things that I've done. I've made my own videos explaining how digital dollhouse might work with a 3D printer. And I did it in my son's nursery with a little web camera. You have to go out and find, and I know I keep saying make something, but that something can be so tiny. It can be an Etsy store. It can be a story that tells me that you have the ambition or the creativity to move forward and be a really productive part of a team. So you getting that playfulness, and that playfulness should be seen in every aspect of what you're doing. You're building your own personal brand. And that can be in anything from your thank you note, to your filter, to your resume, to how you communicate with the person, to what you wear on the interview. You are creating your persona as you move into the world.
Speaking of interviews, do you have also any suggestions dealing with concept? What does a producer look for when dealing with a concept artist or a designer?
Concept artist, it's all about portfolio. And what I want to see, and I use I use Pinterest to find concept artists, and that's not a normal thing, I have been told. I actually got that from an executive producer when I was working at Universal Animation, who said that a lot of art directors use Pinterest as a way for tagging different artists that they've been following over a period of time. And then when you get into character artists, concept artists, and you go to Pinterest and you start using general tags, you start getting the collective, basically choices of various art directors curated for you. So in Curious George, that is actually how we hired most of our concept people, was people that I found on Pinterest. So it isn't just your portfolio, it's about making it really accessible everywhere. Again, assessing your style. I always tell people that I like to see somebody who asserts in their portfolio a personal style and then a professional style with a couple of different like-minded things. So I can see as a concept person, you're going to be able to switch between brands if I need you to.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's great. I would love to get your take on, as a producer, how you get to communicate with the different groups, whether it's artists, engineers, if you have to like talk to them in different ways. How is it when you're like dealing with the entire team?
See, this is when I needed my filters, but now my camera's frozen, so I probably couldn't do it anyway. Because during the pandemic, I had to use everything with filters just to keep everyone's attention on me when we moved a whole team of animators to work from home. So communicating is really key aspect of any job, but it's particularly for a producer. What I do is I try to create little character profiles of all the different groups that I work with. And I also try to get a sort of a character profile of the different teams I'm working with. So like how I think legal works and how I think marketing works. And I sort of create it as a story until other things, until I'm proven otherwise. And then I try to find the thread, a common thread with the people who are communicating and remind everyone where their alignment point is. There can be a lot of conflict in any production because you're always fighting time and resources. But I have found it to be most productive when I get people to step out of themselves and out of their own specific trajectory and get them to think in a broader way. So most of my, I go from really specific to really general quickly.
That's perfect. Thank you. I have a question from Anonymous. Hello, Jessica. A question about sound, movie sound design or game sound design. Which one do you think is more creative work?
Games. But it depends on what type of game. So yes, movie sound design can be incredible. I love sound design. Sound design is awesome. One of my best girlfriends is an incredible sound designer, Pam Aronoff. I suggest you look her up. She does just incredible work. She is right now in League of Legends as a senior sound designer on Valorant. And she's amazing. And what she does is really creative. It's picking through every element. It's defining every character. However, as a game sound designer, I know she gets frustrated because she can't see the whole soundscape together, because that's dependent on the activity and the action of either the player or how it's implemented into the project. In film, you get the luxury of a linear experience where you get to see your sound with all the music and everything. So it ends up being much more satisfying, I think, of a journey. But they both have really high creative elements.
I love that. And yes, it's so hard to choose. I don't know how you
don't need to choose. You can do both. Pam does both. She's done film, she's done games. She works with the same tools. The people that I used to work at Imagineering, who've worked in things like binaural sound, and people don't know what binaural sound is, look it up because it's awesome. It's where you have a microphone that's the same size and weight as a human head, and it can actually incorporate and record 360 sound. And these are really incredibly technical people who are doing this for theme parks, but they've also done film. They've done all kinds of live events. So you don't have to choose.
I love it. You heard it here. You don't have to choose. Just do it all. I have a question here. What is the best type of content would you say could be better? Would it be better to make content like a short series or knowledge content?
Or knowledge content?
Yes.
I'm terrible. I'm going to say both for a reason. You can do knowledge content really cheaply with assets that are out there, whereas a story content and a webisode series can show somebody what your ability is to carry on a storyline. So they both have very different outputs, and they both are, it's really about the story that you want to tell about yourself.
I agree. I think that makes sense. And again, hard to choose.
I mean, I would do, yeah, it was hard to, again, but you don't have to, like, you could do story content, you can do educational content. Now, I was looking at Canva and all these AI tools. You can be popping out new ideas and trying an A/B testing in minutes now. You just don't have to put that much time investment and start thinking about the things that you want to talk about.
Agreed. No, I love that. Let's see. We have another question here. How does producing for animation differ from producing for live action?
I have not done much live action producing. I've done some, but not a lot. But I will tell you about animation. And I guess this has to do more. Curious George was a 2D illustrated animated movie, which is a very old and dying art in some ways. In fact, when I interview for the job as a producer, I always ask the executives, like, what is your biggest challenge in front of you? I'll never forget, my executive producer goes, people keep dying, animators keep dying on us because no one gets trained in like classic 2D hand animation. How do you get these people trained up to fulfill these positions? And we were just moved, had just moved into a digital platform, but it was still a lot of the mindset was traditional animation. And I started calling that process frozen time, because you could be staring, and I kid you not, when it comes to 2D animation at one frame for 20 minutes of how waves look. Animation is a microscopic world into the minute detail of how a world is created, because everything has to be created. So that can be very, very exciting and satisfying if you want to be a real world builder. And when you're a producer in live action, you have to give up a lot more of your vision and your control, especially as a producer. Especially as a producer.
And
there's a lot more talent. There's a lot more like individual talent in front of you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that as well, but I also don't have a lot of experience in the live action world. But I that sounds exactly like how I would have pictured it. Melissa asked, how challenging was it to make decisions for an animation game of such a humanized character as Barbie look believable, but not losing the toy aspect and playfulness of it? How was it tackled? Was it the producer's decision from the start, or more of a trial and error kind of thing?
The first one was really hard. They were all really hard, but the first one was particularly hard because Barbie has so much baggage, and because of the way she's modeled, and because as a toy, and because adults sexualize her, people don't know that her back was increased in order to put batteries in at one point. It isn't just about the large chest. There are so many things that go into the creation of who she is as a character and what she means to girls as a toy. So it was a lot of iteration. We worked with Digital Domain, who were simultaneously creating Titanic when we were doing Barbie Fashion Designer. And we did a lot of testing. And what was really interesting to me was that we discovered, particularly with Barbie, that it wasn't the most identifying feature of Barbie. It wasn't her body, it was her hair. And that long blonde hair, because remember, we're dealing with really young girls, really young children, was the identifier that kids understood. So we started thinking about, like, how can we get the hair into this idea, into the software? We couldn't achieve that for Barbie Fashion Designer, the first one, but how to make that really be in the lighting and everything than just about focusing on her body. Because in order to make all the 3D clothes look right, we had to do some really wacky things with what was underneath there in that rig. The other part of that, she was also motion captured. So most of my, actually almost all of my experience with Barbie has been using live actors or dancers underneath the rig that is proposed as the 3D model. And I have found that casting that person and working with that person is in some ways even more important than what the actual physical animation and the model looks like. So there's lots of different pieces to how these digital characters come together.
I did not know that about Barbie and the whole battery thing and everything. That's so wild.
Oh, yeah. She's a whole universe, that one.
Definitely baggage. Marcella asks, can you recommend a book or resource where we can learn about production and the industry?
Yes. I will have to get you the name. I have it in my closet next to me, and I'd like to go and grab it, but I'm not going to.
Okay. I'm sure we can probably provide that later.
I will get that. But there are some really good resources. But I find I learn everything now on TikTok, but I find there's a lot of great production YouTube and video out there.
That is true.
I actually also do a lot of LinkedIn learning. I see a lot of great content there.
That's true. Yeah, we have so many more resources now that we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do a lot of those classes, like, like $25 lecture, free lecture, or take a Google class. And I always learn something new. And, books are great, but it's hard to get updated books. And, the one I have is very classic animation. I had, when I did Curious George, I was the only producer out of the 13 producers they were looking at who had never done 2D animation. But I was they wanted me to come in because I was the right person job and brought all this kids perspective. Again, back to the whole, don't stay siloed thing. Be aware that your opportunities are in all of your experiences, not just the one thing they're looking for.
Agreed. I have something here from Anthony. Jesyca, your work shaped my girlfriend's upbringing, and she is such a big fan! Exclamation, exclamation. You had a massive positive impact on her life.
Thank you. I always tell people that those products are made with so much love, and certainly not just me, Mattel projects, the Barbie in general, between Rainmaker and Mattel and all the people who made the toys, it's very easy to say, oh, they're just, in it for the money. And there's a lot of people who care about what kids watch and what they play with. So there was a lot of heart in those companies.
I love that. I just want to be mindful of time. So we have just a couple minutes left. I know it just goes by so quickly. There are still a few questions to go. I don't know, Jesyca, if you don't mind staying for a few more minutes.
I can stay for a few more minutes. It's fine. I just want to let you know I'm frozen on my side, so I can't see myself. But I'm fine. I just am watching, so I can't. Also, the chat is frozen for me too. So if you have questions, somebody will have to read them.
Okay, no worries. And so everyone here also, thank you again so much. These are amazing questions. Unfortunately, we just don't have all the time to go through some of them, but we'll go through a few more to get us into maybe about 5 after 6 or so. So yeah, let's continue on. Do you have any suggestions on where it would be the best place to start in the filmmaking world and meet people from that field?
Yes, sort of. Things have changed a lot since the pandemic. I have noticed that maybe I'm projecting, but what I've seen from other people too, people are more willing to take Zoom calls and meet with you for 15 minutes. So go out and start meeting people. I just brought a girl who had reached out to me on LinkedIn, just here from Brazil. She just moved to LA. and we had coffee on the lot, and she had reached out, she had specific questions. Doesn't happen all the time, but go and start doing your one-on-ones. Simultaneously join different groups. There are a lot of great groups out there. I'm always pushing women in animation. I'm also on the advisory board of Women in Games International in WIGI, which I just like saying WIGI. And there are lots of ways to go about getting into film societies. So I know a friend of mine who has utilized the PGA, the Producers Guild of America, to meet tons of people and get projects off the ground. So the access, what used to be such a networking and you had to know somebody and your parents had to know somebody, is really not the case. And use your alumni network.
Oh, that is a great, yeah, alumni network. Absolutely agree with that.
Yeah. And also here's the other thing about networking that I remind people all the time. Don't look at the time period between the connection and the output. It's always good to have the informational meeting, go into it with, I'd like to get some information, give them an easy way to satisfy a need, have an idea. And if you're looking for a job, have some idea of how they can easily help you. Whether it's you've looked at their LinkedIn and seen who they're associated with, but have a strategy that makes it easy for the person that you're reaching out to. Similar with a group. When you join a group, have definitive goals. Talk to the leadership in the group so that you stay productive.
That's great advice. Thank you. From Max, hello. Do you have any tips about pitching a story as a concept artist and writer for shows versus games? Thank you.
Yes, there are some great resources out there about how to pitch for Netflix. You may look at the video of how Stranger Things was pitched. I think pitch decks are the best way to get content across. And that's the best pitch deck, and it's been used for classes on how to pitch. You want to be short. You want to have a pitch deck that's short. And I always advise people have a 30-second video. People don't like even opening up documents. My husband always says, no one reads, nobody reads, and he's right. It's easier to have something that's got some nice audio. You also want to have a disclaimer ahead of it to tell them that it's people don't like getting unsolicited content. So you have to create it in a way that it's easy and safe for them to open. So I think that could work.
Perfect. Yeah. And again, if there's any other references or things that you remember, I'm sure we can pass that along after this.
I'm like starting to wind down my iced coffee.
Oh, no. We have another question here. I think this is quite fascinating from Joao. We know that games take a long time to be made now. How does a AAA company work for those 4 to 6 years to not have an already outdated product at the end of the cycle?
That's a really good question. I do have an idea. They are futurists. They have to be. That's one of the reasons why it takes so long, is everyone's aiming for a potential future goal of what the technology might do. It's great if you want to live wildly. It's fantastic. It's harder when you want very consistent milestones over time. So that's why they're always projecting into the future as much as possible. It's not always possible. And it's only really the AAA games that take so long to make. And that's one of the reasons why they have to take into account and then adjust when they need to improve. It's wonderful, but it's wild. I've never experienced anything quite like that.
I agree. I wish we had more time to talk about the futurists and the idea of everything and how, but we just don't. I have another question here from Malik. With the technology limitations of the 3D animation scene, how would you say affected production, and what did you do? What did you have to sacrifice?
Sorry, I don't know if I understand the question. The technology limitations
of the 3D animation scene. Did that have any effect? Did you have to sacrifice anything?
The 3D animation scene. So like making 3D animation for Barbie, do we have to sacrifice versus 2D?
Let's go with that perspective.
Okay, so you're always giving up something in the change of a platform. So you do have to make some sacrifices in what you think. Like, for example, when I was talking about the hair is notoriously difficult in 3D. We kind of got into it and got better in the movies, but even I can't even watch the movies because I can't stand for hair. They're okay. But I mean, it's just, we only had a certain amount of resources. And because we had to adjust for an entire film, we couldn't do the things that I wish we could have done. Things improved over time. We were lucky enough, I was lucky enough to be involved in 7 films, and there actually have been 32 animated Barbie movies. So they were able to improve in the technology. And what's interesting to me is that we don't get dinged for that. I love that kids are so able to roll with changes that are made to characters and to design, that as long as you're true to the character and the kind of the heart of the product, they're generally okay with how you design them. Generally, not always.
I love that you mentioned the hair. That's fantastic.
Bane of my existence, 3D hair.
Perfect. We only have time for one more question. From Pedro, any advice for anyone wanting to start writing plays? Any study that you think is essential?
Please write plays. Please write so many plays. Write more plays, short plays, big plays. Have them read on TikTok with your friends. I think there needs to be a ton more plays. As far as like, and I also think that schools, especially middle schools and high schools, need more performing arts. And I think you're going to start seeing a lot of more licensed material and content going out to getting kids who are in a live and interactive face-to-face space working with each other. So I think that you cannot have too many plays in this world right now. And then as far as like things to read, I'm not a playwright. I do love theater, but really go out and study the classics, figure out what your voice is.
I love it. And I think that's great for anyone, not just writing plays. If you want to get into marketing or copy or production or anything like that, it's really good for you to just get into the habit of doing something creative. I love it. All right, we're going to slowly wrap things up. Thank you so much, Jesyca, for your time. Thank you, everyone out there, for joining us today. I do want to give a small reminder about the next Women in Games Scholarship opportunity. Yay! So the next round of applications opens on June 28th, and the opportunity is with Timber Games. If you do not know who Timber Games is, please go check them out. They're a fantastic studio, and they'll be offering mentorship and a 6-month paid internship post-grad to the applicants selected. There's more information in the chat. Thank you, Elena. But yes, again, thank you again so much. Thank you, Jesyca, for your time. It was a wonderful time to chat with you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody, and good luck.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.